On the 20th of September 1944, in the misty skies over Lorraine, France, the ominous clatter of German tank tracks echoed through the air. Suddenly, a faint buzzing sound descended from above, not the roar of a fighter plane but the soft hum of a small aircraft with a single engine flying low just above the treetops. Its compact fuselage, olive drab paint, high wings, and slow speed made it look no different from a harmless civilian plane amid the chaos of war. German soldiers on the ground hesitated for a moment as they knew this type of aircraft often directed American artillery. But hesitation quickly turned to panic when smoke trails erupted from beneath the plane's wings bazooka rockets. The daring pilot had mounted 6 M6 rocket launchers, turning the modest scout into a tank-hunting assassin. One German tank exploded, another burst into flames. Flak exploded around the target, but the plane maneuvered skillfully, launching another salvo that sent the panzer formation scattering in fear. On the American side, soldiers of the 4th Armored Division stood frozen in disbelief. The Piper L-4 Grasshopper, usually just a liaison and observation aircraft, had single-handedly broken up an entire German armored unit. When the smoke cleared, they finally realized that the little sparrow had just saved their lives from encirclement. Later, many would call the pilot a brave madman, and the L-4 became a legendary symbol, something that seemed harmless yet struck terror into the enemy. At first glance, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper looked no different from a harmless civilian aircraft, small, high-winged, its propeller spinning lazily, its fuselage painted in muted olive drab, yet behind that gentle appearance lay a remarkable transformation, from flight school trainer to battlefield workhorse. The L-4's origins trace back to the Piper J-3 Cub, a lightweight training aircraft that gained widespread popularity in the late 1930s. Cheap, easy to build, and even easier to fly, the Cub was affectionately known as the Model T of the skies. When the U.S. Army sought a light observation aircraft in 1941 to support ground troops, the Piper Company responded by militarizing the Cub, adding an olive drab paint job, larger observation windows, and the designation 059, later reclassified as the L-4. Initially, the U.S. Army Air Forces were skeptical. They were accustomed to fast, armed reconnaissance aircraft, not slow, fabric-skinned paper planes like the L-4, but several Army commanders, notably Eisenhower and Patton, both capable pilots themselves, saw its tactical promise. During military maneuvers in 1941, the L-4 was tested in artillery spotting missions. The results were immediate and striking. Targets were destroyed faster, and with far greater accuracy than ground-based observation could ever achieve. From that point on, the L-4 was officially integrated into the structure of every U.S. Division 10 aircraft for each infantry division, and 8 for each armored division. These nimble little birds became the ever-watchful eyes of American artillery across the theaters of war. The nickname Grasshopper emerged during a training exercise in Texas, where a pilot wore a shirt emblazoned with the image of the insect. The name stuck, and for good reason. With its light frame, short takeoff and landing ability, and knack for hopping from one makeshift strip to another, the aircraft displayed all the agility of a field grasshopper. The L-4 made its combat debut in North Africa during Operation Torch at the end of 1942. At first, its unfamiliar silhouette caused confusion. One plane was nearly shot down by friendly fire. But within months, over 90 grasshoppers were patrolling the skies over Tunisia, guiding artillery strikes with such precision that ground commanders marveled. Each aircraft, weighing under 800 pounds, was worth its own weight in gunpowder. Between 1,942 and 1,945, more than 3,500 liters 4 seconds were produced, serving wherever American forces went from North Africa to Italy, France, and the Pacific. At a cost of just $2,500 per unit, they were incredibly economical to produce in large numbers. And thanks to their quiet, precise effectiveness, this grasshopper army became an indispensable extension of the U.S. ground forces. Despite its unassuming appearance, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper became the artillery's trusted eyes on the battlefield. Typically crewed by a pilot and an artillery officer acting as observer, each aircraft carried a two-way radio to relay firing coordinates. With a cruising speed of just 105 kilometers per hour and a flight altitude averaging 150-300 meters, the L-4 could loiter slowly over front lines, detecting enemy positions with ease. Once a target was identified, coordinates were immediately radioed back to artillery units, which adjusted their fire accordingly, often hitting with deadly accuracy from the very first round. The entire process took just minutes, a dramatic improvement over traditional methods or calling in bomber squadrons, which required hours of preparation. A striking example occurred in Sicily in 1943. A lone L-4 with the call sign Fanny Rouge spotted a concentration of German troops and directed artillery fire that eliminated the position in just 11 rounds under 5 minutes. Previously, a mission like that would have required an entire squadron of medium bombers. From then on, Allied troops developed unshakable faith in the Grasshopper. Whenever one circled overhead, they knew that a storm of artillery fire could descend on the enemy at a moment's notice. To survive such dangerous missions, L-4 pilots received rigorous training. They flew as low as possible, using terrain for cover. The unspoken rule: the lower the better if there's danger, land immediately. At just 180 meters in altitude, the Grasshopper could observe targets up to 10 kilometers away. If attacked by German fighters, pilots would often land quickly in an open field or wooded area and drag the aircraft into nearby bushes for concealment. Thanks to its lightweight design, this could be done in less than a minute. One rookie pilot even escaped pursuit from 4 Stuka dive bombers by skimming treetops until the enemy gave up the chase. In terms of design, the L-4 was simplicity refined for maximum effectiveness. Its fully transparent canopy provided an unobstructed 360-degree field of vision crucial for its role as an aerial observer. On later models like the L-4H, the rear seat could even be reversed, allowing the observer to watch the aircraft's tail and spot any enemy fighters attempting to sneak up from behind. The observer wasn't just a passive passenger, he handled radio communications, navigation support, and was vital to the coordination of artillery fire. One small but practical requirement: observers ideally weighed no more than 77 kilograms, to keep the aircraft as light and agile as possible, especially when taking off from short, improvised airstrips under fire. But artillery spotting was only one of the Grasshopper's many talents. The L-4 was also a courier, delivering dispatches, maps, and even food and supplies to isolated or surrounded units. During the Normandy campaign in 1944, L-4 pilots flew dangerously low over the Bocage countryside, spotting German ambushes hidden in hedgerows, intelligence that saved countless Allied tanks from sudden attacks. On the 22nd of August 1944, General Leclerc used a Grasshopper to fly across active front lines from Normandy to the outskirts of Paris, where he personally sought approval to liberate the French capital. The very next day, an L-4 was assigned a daring mission: to fly over Nazi-occupied Paris and drop a message on the Hôtel de Ville, the city hall. The message simply read, "Hold on, we are coming," a small piece of paper that carried immense hope. The Grasshopper even served as a makeshift air ambulance. Wounded soldiers were sometimes loaded onto stretchers and placed behind the cockpit for rapid evacuation to field hospitals. In more rugged terrains, such as Burma or the Pacific Islands, some L-4 seconds were modified to strap stretchers to the outside of the fuselage. One particularly moving story took place during Christmas 1944 inches, the besieged town of Bastogne. Amid a relentless German bombardment, U.S. Army Surgeon Major Howard Serrell piloted an L-4 into the encircled town. Over the course of 36 hours, he performed 15 emergency surgeries under battlefield conditions, all made possible by the speed, agility, and courage embodied by the humble Grasshopper. Yet despite its resourcefulness, the L-4 was far from invulnerable. Once the Germans realized how critical these aircraft were to Allied operations, they began deploying more anti-aircraft guns and fighters to hunt them down. In just the 2 months following the Normandy landings, General Bradley's First Army lost 49 Grasshoppers and 33 pilots to enemy action. Still, given the aircraft's contributions from artillery coordination to reconnaissance, command support, communications, and casualty evacuation, many considered those losses a tragic but necessary price to pay. One officer once remarked, "The Grasshopper may be small and unsophisticated, but it was more effective than any weapon we had, at least until the atomic bomb came along." Exaggeration or not, it was clear this seemingly harmless little airplane had become a genuine force to be reckoned with. After all its silent yet extraordinary contributions, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper was not merely a tactical tool, it became a vivid symbol of agility and courage in modern warfare. And nothing demonstrates that better than the dramatic real-life moments when this tiny grasshopper appeared at just the right time, tipping the balance between life and death. Among countless feats, some stand out as seemingly impossible, but they were all entirely real. These episodes capture the boundless ingenuity and iron will of the L-Bird pilot's men, who carried nothing more than a sidearm, sat in a fragile airframe made of fabric and light metal, yet were always ready to fly into danger to complete their mission. One of the most remarkable achievements associated with the Piper L-4 Grasshopper is tied to a man as exceptional as his deeds. Major Charles Carpenter, affectionately known by his comrades as Bazooka Charlie. Before becoming the bane of Nazi armored divisions, Carpenter was a humble history teacher in Illinois. But war transformed him into a living symbol of bravery and imagination, a man who dared to do what no one had ever attempted, turning an unarmed reconnaissance plane into a genuine tank-destroying machine. In 1944, Carpenter served as an artillery spotter for the U.S. 4th Armored Division, part of General Patton's famed Third Army. His job was to coordinate artillery fire from the skies, a vital yet mostly supportive role. But Carpenter wasn't content with simply flying and pointing targets. Witnessing his fellow soldiers being overwhelmed by German tanks during brutal engagements, he realized that observation alone wasn't enough. With rare initiative and fearless resolve, he chose to upgrade both his mission and his supposedly flimsy paper plane. After seeking permission from his superiors and receiving a hesitant but trusting green light, Carpenter began modifying his aircraft. At first, he attached 2 M1 bazookas, the standard anti-tank rocket launcher used by U.S. infantry, beneath the wings of his Piper Cub. The results were promising. Soon, he doubled down, upgrading his arsenal to 6 M6 rocket launchers using heat, high-explosive anti-tank rounds. 3 launchers on each wing turned Rosie the Rocketer, the name he gave his plane, into one of the only armed Piper L-4 seconds in the entire war. The name Rosie the Rocketer wasn't chosen at random. It was a deliberate nod to Rosie the Riveter, the iconic symbol of American women who powered the war effort from the home front, and a reflection of the rocket-firing capability that transformed Carpenter's Piper L-4 into O2, something far beyond a scout plane. By naming his aircraft Rosie, Carpenter wasn't just honoring millions of women behind the lines, he was making a bold declaration. The L-4 wasn't just for observing, it could strike, and Rosie proved that brilliantly. Carpenter's most famous combat action came in September 1944, during the Battle of Haraucourt in eastern France, one of the largest armored clashes between American forces and German tank divisions on the Western Front. As panzer units launched a desperate counteroffensive to slow the Allied advance, Carpenter dove straight into the fray in his L-4, armed with 6 bazookas. In a single day, he flew 3 daring sorties, each time skimming treetops to dodge anti-aircraft fire, before unleashing volleys of rockets directly onto enemy tanks. In total, he fired 16 rockets that day, destroying or disabling at least 2 tanks and several armored vehicles, helping to blunt the momentum of the German assault. But Carpenter didn't stop there. In October, he continued his campaign from the skies, adding 4 more tanks and 1 armored truck to his tally. Officially, he was credited with destroying 6 enemy tanks, 2 of them the feared Tiger models, which were notorious among Allied troops for their nearly impenetrable armor and devastating firepower. The most astonishing part? All of this was accomplished by a man flying a light observation aircraft originally designed for liaison duties, not combat. The American press hailed him as a national hero. Stars and Stripes described him as a legend in a unit where reckless courage is a daily standard. His fellow soldiers admired him as the man who turned a paper airplane into a flying fortress. And the Germans? Their view of the humble L-4 changed overnight. Once dismissed as a harmless nuisance buzzing overhead, the arrival of Rosie the Rocketer made German troops shoot wildly into the sky at the sight of any L-4 silhouette. No one wanted to be the next target of this fire-breathing grasshopper. For Major Carpenter, the L-4 was more than just a plane. It was a comrade, a weapon, and a lifeline. It was his way of defending the infantrymen below in every way he could. When asked why he risked so much, his answer was as simple as it was defiant. All I want to do is kill as many German tanks as I can, before they kill us. With Bazooka Charlie, war wasn't just about following orders, it was about daring to act. And thanks to him, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper was no longer a harmless-looking aircraft. It became a silent nightmare over Europe, striking fear into the hearts of Nazi troops through the sheer boldness of one man and the ingenious simplicity of a machine that looked fragile at first glance. That same spirit of audacity and improvisation among L-4 pilots didn't stop with rocket launchers mounted on a recon plane. In the closing days of the war, an incident so unbelievable it seemed fictional actually took place, a dogfight fought with handguns. On the 11th of April 1945, as World War II neared its end, pilot Merritt Dwayne Francis and observer William Martin of the U.S. Third Army were on a reconnaissance mission over Germany. While patrolling, they spotted a Fieseler F-156 Storch, the German military's famous liaison aircraft, hovering near an American armored column. Realizing the potential danger, if the Storch relayed their coordinates, German artillery could rain fire on the tanks. Francis made a snap decision: pursue and engage. Their Piper L-4, humorously nicknamed Miss Me, carried no heavy weapons. In the cockpit were just two standard-issue Colt M1911 pistols. Rather than turn back, Francis and Martin flung open the side windows, leaned out, and launched themselves into what may be the most unconventional dogfight in modern warfare, chasing a German plane with handguns in hand. The chase unfolded at extremely low altitude, just a few hundred feet above the trees. The two light aircraft circled each other through the air like a real-life game of cat and mouse, even as anti-aircraft fire still echoed below. Francis skillfully maneuvered his L-4 to the upper right of the Storch, just enough for Martin in the back seat to get a clear shot. The planes flew so close that Francis later said he could see the German pilot's eyeballs as big as goose eggs. Short bursts from the M1911S pierced the cockpit, the fuel tank, and the wing of the Storch. Moments later, the German aircraft spiraled down into a field and flipped over in a cloud of dust. Francis immediately landed nearby. He and Martin rushed to the wreck and captured the two German pilots as they crawled out. One of them had taken a bullet to the leg. When Francis removed his boot to administer first aid, a .45 caliber round fell out of his pant leg, a strange, solid souvenir from a one-of-a-kind dogfight. Their bold and improbable victory earned both men the Distinguished Flying Cross and secured a place in history for the most bizarre aerial duel of the Second World War. That same spirit of bold improvisation was also vividly demonstrated on the battlefields of North Africa, where the Piper L-4 first entered real combat. In 1943, while patrolling the Tunisian coastline, an American L-4 crew unexpectedly spotted a rubber dinghy moving stealthily offshore. Inside was a group of German soldiers attempting to escape across the Mediterranean. Without heavy weaponry, the two Americans resorted to a familiar tactic. They dropped to low altitude, opened the cockpit windows, and fired warning shots from their pistols into the air. Startled by the sudden appearance of the paper airplane, the German troops panicked. waved white cloths in surrender, and obediently turned their boat back toward shore. The L-4 immediately made an emergency landing on the beach, leaving the observer behind to guard the prisoners, while the pilot took off again to call for reinforcements. A live capture without firing a shot directly only possible thanks to the daring, agility, and quick thinking of Grasshopper pilots. From the fiery battlegrounds of Tunisia and Aracourt to the skies over Germany, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper always appeared at just the right time, in just the right place, executing missions that no one would have thought possible for a plane made of fabric and steel tubing. More than just the eyes of the artillery, the L-4 became a symbol of creativity, decisiveness, and grit carried out by men who seemed ordinary but accomplished the extraordinary. Most L-bird pilots remain anonymous today, yet they not only flew, they fought, rescued, relayed messages, guided forces, and inspired comrades, all packed into an aircraft weighing under 400 kilograms. And throughout the war, every time the Allies on the ground heard the soft, distinctive hum of a Grasshopper engine above, they knew they were not alone. Somewhere up there, a watchful eye was scanning the battlefield, a trusted friend lending support. That is what allowed this small, unassuming airplane to live on as a silent legend of the Second World War. When the last gunshots of World War II faded, the Piper L-4 Grasshoppers quietly completed their final missions, just as they had served silently throughout the years of conflict. They did not thunder across the skies in victory parades, nor bask in post-war glory. True to their humble spirit, the Grasshoppers withdrew from the battlefield like soloists, concluding their part in the great symphony of war without needing applause. Due to the high cost of transport, many L-4 seconds remained behind on the soil where they had fought. Some were dismantled and sold for scrap right where they landed, ending their service in silence amid European junkyards. Others were luckier donated to Allied nations, or converted back into civilian Piper J-3 Cubs, taking on new lives as training planes, crop dusters, or sport aircraft. From the skies of Normandy to the farmlands of America's Midwest, the silhouette of the L-4 still drifts gently overhead, steadfast and unshowy just like the spirit it embodied, simple, reliable, and enduring. Though long retired from the battlefield, the legacy of the Grasshopper has never faded. The lessons it offered about adaptability, flexibility, and the surprising effectiveness of light reconnaissance aircraft laid the foundation for an entire generation of military liaison planes that followed. From the Cessna L-19 Bird Dog in the Korean War to the OV-10 Bronco in Vietnam, all carried within them the fighting spirit once embodied by that little Grasshopper. It is no coincidence that aviation historians often call the Piper Cub the grandfather of modern observation aircraft. It introduced a new tactical perspective and proved that, in war, a simple tool placed in the right hands can be more powerful than 100 complex machines. Over time, the Grasshopper etched itself into the collective memory not merely as a military asset, but as a cultural icon. For Americans, the image of the olive-drab Piper Cub, compact and low-flying, became as familiar and beloved as the Ford Model T on city streets. In war, memorial parades and vintage air shows, the Grasshopper continues to receive special reverence not for its flamboyance, but for the quiet courage it once stood for. If one had to find a metaphor, the Piper L-4 Grasshopper was the tireless battlefield courier, the unarmed medic, the silent companion who was always there when needed. It never dropped atomic bombs nor shot down squadrons of enemy fighters, and that's exactly what made it special. Small, slow, and rudimentary traits that seemed like weaknesses became decisive advantages when used wisely. Considered beneath notice by many, the Grasshopper would quietly circle above the front lines, directing artillery fire, relaying orders, or flying a doctor through shell fire to treat the wounded behind enemy lines. For Allied soldiers, the sight of an L-4 floating above was a morale boost, a sign that someone was watching, protecting, and ready to rain down firepower if necessary. For German troops, the soft buzzing of a Grasshopper overhead was a chilling omen. Somewhere, artillery barrels were being aligned. Not every aircraft can both inspire hope and strike fear in equal measure, but the Grasshopper did. silently and effectively. Today, though the names of many L-4 pilots may no longer be remembered, the feats they achieved alongside their humble aircraft remain an inseparable part of World War II's broader narrative. They proved that victory doesn't always come from the loudest weapon, and influence doesn't always belong to those who make the most noise. The Piper L-4 Grasshopper, the steel-winged grasshopper, will always be remembered as a symbol of bravery, resilience, and the quiet power of being in the right place at the right time.